What if I told you there's a completely legal way to put money aside, potentially lower your taxes, invest that money in things like stocks and ETFs, watch it grow, and then if you use it correctly, you can take that money back out tax free? That probably sounds like some sort of complicated tax loophole reserved only for the ultra rich, but it is not. It is called a health savings account or an HSA. Let's talk about it. Depending on what kind of health insurance you have, a health savings account might be one of the best and most useful accounts available to you. You can use the money for doctor's visits, prescriptions, dental work, glasses, chiropractic care, and all sorts of other medical expenses. You can even use it for over the counter medicines like cough medicine. There is one catch, though, not everybody's eligible. To understand who is eligible, we need to first understand one of the most confusing words in the health insurance industry, and that word is the deductible. First of all, a quick disclaimer though. Before we get into this, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not a tax professional. I am not an insurance agent, and I'm definitely not a healthcare provider. So this video is for general educational purposes only. If you have an important decision to make about your healthcare or about your finances, I urge you to please speak with an expert. All right. With that out of the way, though, let's talk about this part that confuses the most people. All right. It's the deductible. And honestly, once you understand what the deductible is, the rest of the HSA conversation gets a whole lot easier. So let's say, for example, your health insurance plan has a $1,500 deductible. That means that generally you are going to pay your medical costs until you reach $1,500. All right. Only after that does your insurance start to share part of the bill. So you have to meet that deductible. Now, look at the yellow section on the left. This is before you've met your deductible. Let's say you go to the doctor and the insurance company's negotiated price for that visit is $200. You may have to pay that $200 yourself. You're not necessarily paying the giant price the doctor's office originally listed. Your insurance company may have negotiated a lower rate as part of doing business with that doctor, between that doctor and the insurance company, right? So, but anyway, you're probably still the one paying that lower rate. And that money begins counting towards your deductible. So you pay $200 here. Maybe you have another test later on, and then maybe you see a specialist after that. Little by little, you are moving towards that deductible. It's your $1,500 deduct, remember, for that example. Now, take a look at the blue section. All right, we are now reaching the middle. So now you've met your deductible. You have paid $1,500 out of your wallet. You've paid the required amount, the deductible for the calendar year. And it does go by calendar year, by the way. Now, this is where people sometimes get confused. Meeting your deductible does not necessarily mean everything becomes free. It usually just means that the insurance company begins sharing more of the cost according to the rules of your plan. And all plans are a little different. Maybe your insurance pays 80% and you pay 20%. That 20% is called coinsurance. Or maybe certain services have a copay. The point is, once the deductible is met, you've reached an important turning point. And the insurance company usually at that time starts taking on more of the cost. Now, let's take a look at the green section here. Your insurance is now sharing the bill with you. You might still have copays. You might still be paying some coinsurance, but you keep moving toward another number. That number is called your out-of-pocket maximum. And that's different from the deductible. The easiest way that I know to explain this is the deductible is the point where insurance starts helping more. Okay. And then the out-of-pocket maximum is the point where you've reached the plan's annual limit on your share of covered in-network costs. I just did it this year, as a matter of fact. I met my maximum, right? I paid for a ankle surgery. I paid my share of the ankle surgery. So I met my out-of-pocket maximum, which was a lot. So what does that mean? It means that according to my plan, I now pay $0 for deductibles, $0 for copays, and $0 for coinsurance for my covered medical expenses throughout the rest of the calendar year. So one important thing, though, is that your monthly premium does not count towards your deductible. Okay. So that premium is simply what you pay every month just to maintain and have insurance. So please don't get confused there. Whatever the amount coming out of your paycheck for the insurance is going to keep coming out of your paycheck every month for the year, no matter how far you are along with your deductible or your maximum out of pocket. So, a high deductible plan does not necessarily mean you pay full price, though, for absolutely everything until you reach that number. I also want to point out that maybe physicals or preventative care is sometimes just already covered. So you may not have to pay a copay on that. So check with your own plan. All right. Now that we understand a deductible, we can finally understand what people mean when they say a high deductible health plan. So, what is a high deductible health plan? There are different ways health insurance companies can divide costs between you and the insurance company. A more traditional, lower deductible plan might look something like this. You pay a higher amount every month for the insurance, but when you go to the doctors, you only end up paying a $30 or $40 copay, for example. The insurance company starts helping with certain expenses sooner. With a high deductible health plan, on the other hand, the trade off looks different. You may pay less every month for the insurance, but you agree to take on more of the initial costs. Here's the basic trade off. For more traditional plans, you may pay more every month, but your medical costs might be lower and more predictable. For high deductible plans, you'll likely pay less in premiums every month, but if something happens, you're probably going to pay more out of your own pocket before the insurance company starts helping you out or paying their share. And that's where the health savings account comes into play. The HSA gives eligible people a tax-advantaged way to set aside money to help cover those medical costs. For 2026, under the traditional federal rules, the minimum annual deductible is $1,700 for self-only coverage, that's individuals, and $3,400 for family coverage. So, and this is the important part, do not assume that any plan with a large deductible automatically qualifies you for an HSA. You got to look for the words HSA eligible or HSA compatible when you're looking at the plans. All right. We're finally ready to talk about the account itself. All right. An HSA or health savings account is an account that eligible people can use to save money for qualified medical expenses. And I want to stress that calling it a simple medical savings account does not do it any justice. All right. It really undersells the account. The big attraction here is the tax treatment. I always hear people say that HSA accounts are triple tax advantaged, and it's true. All right. And what does that mean, though? It means first that the money contributed to the HSA may give you a tax benefit. So depending on how the contributions are made, they could be excluded from your income or deducted from your taxes. So you need to make sure that you talk to your tax professional or tax preparer about that. Secondly, when the money is inside of your account, it is allowed to grow tax-free. And we can talk about how that's possible later on or how to maximize that growth. Third, when the money comes out to pay for your qualified medical expenses, those distributions can and often are tax-free. So think about that. You get a tax benefit going in, you get a tax benefit as your money's in there and continues to grow. And then as you withdraw the money, you also get a tax benefit because you're not paying any taxes on that money that you're withdrawing, as long as you use it for qualified medical expenses. And that, guys, is why people get really excited about HSAs. So who's eligible? Now for the catch, right? You generally need qualifying health coverage to contribute to an HSA. So that means you need to be covered by an HSA compatible high deductible health plan. You also generally cannot have certain other disqualifying health coverage. So, for example, you cannot be enrolled in Medicare and continue making regular HSA contributions. And you generally cannot be claimed as someone else's dependent and still make HSA contributions. Note, though, and this is important, there is a difference between having money in an HSA and being eligible to put new money into an HSA. So you can lose eligibility somewhere along the lines if you change medical plans. All right. But that does not mean you lose the money or lose the HSA that you had previously. That money doesn't disappear. It's still your money. Now, for a question I'm sure you're curious about, how much can you put into your HSA? Well, 2026, the contribution limit is $4,400 per individual or $8,750 for family coverage. Also, if you're 55 or older, you can generally contribute an additional $1,000 per year to your HSA. But here's something people often miss. If your employer contributes money to your HSA, which would be great, by the way, that counts towards your annual contribution limit as well. So let's say your employer puts money into the account for you. Great. You want to look for an employer, by the way, that's willing to do that. That's a fantastic benefit. But you need to include that money when keeping track of how much has gone into that account for the year. All right, let's get to the practical part now. What can you use your HSA withdrawals or distributions for? You can use them for qualified medical expenses, but what does that mean? Well, it can mean doctor's visits, hospital expenses, prescription medication, dental treatment, vision care, glasses, contact lenses, physical therapy, mental health care, even certain medical equipment, and over-the-counter medications, as we discussed earlier. Also, you can sometimes use HSA money for qualified medical expenses for family members, such as your spouse or eligible dependents. You got to be careful, though, because not everything that's good for you qualifies as a medical expense under HSA. So I did some research on this, and unfortunately, a gym membership, even though it's good for your health, does not count. All right. Cosmetic procedures also typically do not qualify. And insurance premiums are generally not qualified HSA expenses. So meaning you can't take money out of your HSA account to pay for your medical insurance every month, your premiums. All right. There's certain stipulations, like maybe if you have COBRA coverage or unemployment compensation, maybe certain medical or Medicare related premiums after the age of 65. But don't guess on those. Please check the rules and make sure, as we've talked about, keep your receipts, please. All right. I know we talked about this already, but I want to reiterate your money does not just disappear at the end of the year, it rolls over. So that's another reason a lot of people rant and rave about HSAs. Even if you leave your employer, the HSA does not belong to your company. Generally, it belongs to you. So that changes the way you can think about the account. It doesn't have to be which medical bill can I pay with this money now? All right. It can be how much can I build up for future medical expenses? Now, for the part that surprises a lot of people, and I find it very interesting, it's the investing side of this, right? So some health savings accounts allow you to invest the money. And I'm not talking about getting a tiny amount of interest on a savings type of account, right? Depending on the HSA provider, you can have access to all sorts of investments. For example, Fidelity says that its directed HSA can offer investments including mutual funds, bonds, ETFs, and even individual stocks, right? And Schwab also offers something called a health savings brokerage account, or an HSBA, which can provide brokerage style investing inside of an HSA. And I'm not sponsored by Schwab by any means, but I can tell you that I use them personally, and I've always had pretty good experience with their platform and their customer service. And again, that's not an endorsement for Schwab. It's not an endorsement for Fidelity, although I have had pretty good experience with them as well. It's just my personal experience, right? And if you're not into all the investing stuff, you can still use an HSA simply as a cash buildup with all the tax benefits that we discussed. So a question I've seen asked is, should you invest all of your money in your HSA, right? So all of the money that's in there, that is, should you invest that in stocks? And I want to be responsible here and remind you that I'm not a financial advisor, right? And there is risk in stocks. You know how they go up? Well, they also go down. So Unfortunately, let's give it an unfortunate example, right? Let's say you put $5,000 into your HSA account. Now, it'd have to be over the course of several years, unless you had a family, of course. But you have $5,000 in there. You invest it in stocks, right? And they're flying high for a while. And then all of a sudden, it takes a dump. And then you have a medical expense come up. Let's say you have a surgery you need, and now your $5,000 is only worth $2,500. That is not a great situation. And for that reason, some people might separate their HSA into two buckets. All right. And this is, again, not advice, just what I've seen some people do. Now, they separate into cash that they're going to need soon, that they know is expected medical expenses, right? They're going to need some prescription medication. They're going to go see the doctor, and they might have a little bit of extra money in there in case something comes up. Then they'll take the other half of that bucket and they'll invest that money, hoping that it grows. All right. Everyone's situation is different, though. I just wanted to make you aware of that option and that people do it. All right, there's another strategy that I'll refer to as an advanced HSA strategy. And this is where it gets quite interesting. However, I will keep it short, though, because not everyone's going to be interested in this strategy. Some people do this. Instead of immediately taking money out of their HSA, they pay their medical bills out of just regular old money from their pocket, right? Then they make sure they keep the receipt. Meanwhile, they leave their money in the HSA, potentially earning interest, potentially growing if it's invested. And then later on, might be a week, maybe a month, maybe years, they seek reimbursement, meaning they take money out of their HSA account for the procedure or whatever medical expense that they had. All right, provided that it was an eligible medical expense and provided that it was incurred after the HSA was established. And they, of course, have the records to prove it. All right, that's an advanced strategy, again, for excellent record keepers. And there's nothing wrong with that strategy. It's perfectly legal. It just requires a lot of meticulous documentation. And you can't be like, hey, I think I had a dental bill 8 years ago, so I'm going to go ahead and take money out of my HSA to go on vacation with, right? You need the receipts. You need to be able to prove it. All right, so what happens after the age of 65, though? There's another reason that people look at the HSA as a long-term account. Before the age of 65, if you take money out for something that isn't a qualified medical expense, you may owe ordinary income tax plus an additional 20% tax on it. So after the age of 65, though, the additional 20% tax no longer exists. Qualified medical withdrawals can still be tax-free, of course, but non-medical withdrawals generally become subject to just regular income tax. So there's no additional HSA penalty after the age of 65. And that doesn't make an HSA account identical to a retirement account by any means, because it's not. But that feature is a reason that some people think about an HSA as part of their long-term financial planning rather than simply a medical debit card. Okay, so who might benefit most from an HSA, right? If you're someone who can get money contributed by your employer, then you might be someone who wants to consider an HSA. If you're someone who can afford the risk of a higher deductible, or someone who wants to put aside tax-advantaged money for medical expenses, you may want to consider an HSA. If you're someone who has the ability to leave some of the money untouched for future health costs, or maybe you're someone who wants an HSA with investment options and who actually understands the risks of investing, then you might want to consider an HSA. Remember, though, that there's no automatic right answer for everyone. If you have a very high recurring medical cost or costs, like expensive medications or frequent doctor's visits, or you might struggle to come up with the money for a large deductible, then choosing a high deductible plan simply because you like the idea of an HSA might be a mistake. So look into it. You have to compare the entire health plan, not just the HSA. You need to look at, let's say, the monthly premium, the deductible, the copays, the coinsurance, the out-of-pocket maximum, the prescription coverage, employer HSA contributions, and your actual medical needs. Here's the bottom line. A health savings account can be very simple. Put money in, use it for medical bills, save on taxes, done. But it can also be so much more than that. The money can roll over year after year and the account stays with you. Certain HSAs even allow for investing, like we discussed. It can even become a long-term tool. So the next time you're looking at health insurance plans, Don't just ask yourself, what is the monthly premium? Start asking yourself, what is the deductible? What is the most I could pay out of pocket? Is this plan HSA compatible? Does my employer put money into the account? That's a big one. And if I open an HSA, can I save it, invest it, and use it in any way that actually makes sense to me? A health savings account may look like just another little box on an HR employee benefits form, but once you understand how it works, it can be a whole lot more than that. I want to thank everybody for watching. Please like and subscribe if you like this content so that we can keep making it. Take care.